I'll just give a moment for everybody to join who's waiting.
Hi, Petrina. Hi, Kingsley.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Ogirri. How are you? Good to
I'm very
see
fine,
you.
thank you. How are you?
First time I'm seeing you this year, yeah?
I guess so. I think so. How's it going?
Going well. Going well.
Excellent.
Very good. Oh. Well, as people are joining, just to say thank you so much for making the time to join us this afternoon for our great conversation on from candidate to advocate, using the recruitment experience as the first step to retention. I'm absolutely delighted today to welcome Kingsley Ogirri, Group Head for HR at ProvidusBank. Thank you so much for joining us, Kingsley.
Thank you for having me, Petrina. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's nice to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. And a very, very warm welcome to everybody who's joining us now. I'm just really honoured to have this conversation, and over the course of the next hour, Kingsley and I will be talking together, and we'll probably talk together for around about 45 minutes and allow around about 10 to 15 at the end for conversation and for Q&A. As we go today, we do invite you to pose your questions in the chat. And we will be watching out for them. And we may pause at some points to answer the question, but we will certainly pause round about 1/4 to the hour. I'm sure it will be a very interesting and powerful conversation today. And just for the benefit of those who couldn't join us, we will be recording the session. So, as I said, I'm very honoured to be joined by you today, Kingsley, and very much look forward to the rich insights that you'll share and to hearing more as well about ProvidusBank, which is a very high-performing certified organisation that we have the pleasure of working with at Great Place to Work, with an outstandingly, if I may say, powerful employee culture. For example, overwhelmingly 95% of your people say it's a great place to work, which is for many, over 2 decades in this industry, an absolutely stunning result. And, typically, as we know, an average may be around about the 50s. So it's a very powerful organisation. To get us started today, please, would you be kind enough to introduce yourself, Kingsley?
Thank you, Petrina. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to say thank you to the Great Place to Work Institute for creating this forum. It's a good forum for people to come together and drive conversations about employee engagement and fostering the right organizational culture. So I think in introducing myself, I'll say my name is Kingsley Ogirri, probably the youngest CHRO in the Nigerian banking sector today. Spent about 17, 18 years, gaining and gathering work experience across different industries. I started off in the banking sector, did some transition to investment banking, so a lot of them within the financial services sphere. And after that, I went into the hospitality and real estate segment for a multinational at the time, a company that had Pan-African presence. I'm a first-class graduate of sociology from the University of Lagos. I have a postgraduate from the University of Leicester in human resource management and training. Currently working on an executive master's in business administration at the Business School Netherlands, and I think that's it for me, so that I don't spend too much time introducing myself. Thank you, Petrina.
Oh, thank you so much, Kingsley. So maybe you could share a headline with us about ProvidusBank. It's a brand we're very much familiar with, but how would you sum it up in a sentence, and what perhaps differentiates you as an organisation?
I think for us in ProvidusBank, what differentiates us is the need to drive innovation and to provide excellent customer service across all our customer touch points. The banking sector, typically, the products that we sell are all the same, right? But the differentiator is the service that the customers get. And in ProvidusBank, service excellence is one of our key priority areas. In fact, it's a strategic goal for us as a bank. And so every day we come in thinking of how we can provide our customers with unique experiences, such that once we're able to do that, we make them adopt us as their preferred financial partner. That for us is a driving force in ProvidusBank. And for us to do that effectively, we must have the right people, because the people ultimately are critical to the success of any organization. If the people are very excited about working here, our customers will always have a wow experience. And so ProvidusBank, we like to say our mantra is future forward banking. We like to drive that future forward thinking in the services that we deliver, in the products that we put out to the market. And that's something that's very important for us as a financial institution. Yes, you might say that we're just 9 years old, but the strides that we're making as an institution, thanks to the foresight and the vision of our executive management team, is something that is unparalleled. And I think that's something that keeps driving us as a bank.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. And this may be a tricky one, but what would you say is the most important function that you have as Chief HRO at Providus?
Yeah, that's tricky. That's very tricky. Okay, so I like to say that my job as CHRO of ProvidusBank is to make everyone happy. In fact, it's one of the things that our managing director and CEO is very keen on. How do you make employees happy? And I'm privileged to work with a very smart, young, and intelligent team of HR professionals. Together, we put our heads together every day, thinking of how to make everyone happy. We're always brainstorming about how we can foster employee experience. So my job as CHRO typically is to make everyone happy. Within the context of the culture that we have in ProvidusBank, and that culture typically is one that drives high performance. It means that in making everyone happy, everyone has to be a performer. Everyone has to bring value to the table. We must see the value that you're bringing on board. And in doing that, we're very intentional, very deliberate about how to make sure that our top performers, our key performers are, always happy, always happy. Happy may not necessarily be monetary wise, right? But I think that if you check the industry, not to blow our trumpet, we're doing very well in terms of remuneration, and we'll continue to do well because of our compensation philosophy. Happy may also be looking at those areas that are critical to the different cohorts that you have in your workforce. What's important to the millennials, what's important to the Gen X's, what's important to Generation Alpha. Those are things that we spend time working on, myself and the team, to make sure that everyone is happy. So sometimes it may be money, sometimes it may just be proper welfare, employee welfare. Sometimes it may be time off work, those little things that people may not think are very important, but it's the little things that actually matter.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. And I have, it's the little things that matter. And I have the sense from what you've said, it's about understanding perhaps people as individuals. And as you were talking, I had the sense you started with happy, and I had the sense that you were talking about people being valued as individuals, but also valuable, the high notion of high performance, driving retention of people, but also where you started, customer retention. So yeah, a powerful cycle. And indeed, we're here to talk today about the experience of your people, from being candidates to being true advocates. And if I may, I'd like to get kind of straight to the heart of that, and thinking about talent acquisition, so how you bring talented people on board. How do you as an organisation define successful talent acquisition?
Okay, so successful talent acquisition for us is getting the people who have the right attitude, the right competencies to fit the gaps that have been identified, and tracking their performance over time to see that they're actually the right fit, and ultimately that they are plugging the hole, but also bringing value. And I think what is critical for everyone in HR is the fact that the new hires that join the organization must always bring value to the table. And so successful talent acquisition, or talent acquisition in itself, is not successful until the talent that you have acquired brings significant value. That value may be improved efficiency, that value may be improved profitability, but we must be able to point to the facts that every single one that has joined the organization has been able to contribute significantly to the growth of the organization. And I'm always specific to mention that sometimes that growth, yes, in financial services, in the banking sector, it may revolve around the bottom line and it may revolve around profitability, but sometimes that growth may be seen in terms of the effectiveness and the efficiency of a process when you bring somebody on board to manage it, right? And so you need to look at it across all the spectrums, not just taking it in isolation. So a successful talent acquisition process to us, or a successful hire to us, is someone who joins the bank, and we know from day one that this person is the right fit. We know from day one that this person has the right attitude. We know from day one that this person is versatile in terms of the job role. And we know from day one that this person can bring in value, whether the person is in a sales function or a support function.
Thank you so much. So again, I'm very struck by this notion of bringing in value and getting it right to start with, but tracking it and really understanding exactly what value they add, whether it's profitability, whether it's efficiency, but each person needs to bring value. I was also struck by, at the beginning of your answer, you said, when I said, what's successful talent acquisition, the first thing you said was attitude, which is, yeah, an interesting point to start us on. In terms of, we as people always love the detail and examples, so I wonder if you'd be kind enough to give us a bit of a flavour of your end-to-end recruitment process. So how does it happen?
It's kind of a trade secret, isn't it? But it's okay. I'll try and share.
Just anything you're comfortable to share, but any headlines that you'd like to share. So.
Okay, so I'll go high level. First and foremost, I think our recruitment process is quite rigorous because, like I pointed out, we're trying to make sure that we get the right person who's able to fit the role and with the right attitude. Attitude is everything if you want to get someone into a role. So in ProvidusBank, first and foremost, it starts with making sure that the candidate has clarity on the job role. And how do we do that? It means that for every job role, the assumption in answering this question, by the way, is that we've gone through the internal processes of identifying why we need a job, why we need to create the vacancy, why we need to bring in someone that will fill that vacancy. So I've gone through that. I'm making an assumption. We've gone through all that. We've defined what the job description is. We've identified the competencies, both the behavioral and technical competencies for that job role. And once we've cleared that internal process, the next important thing is to make, to share that need, that vacancy, try an advert out. There are different ways through which we source for candidates, by the way. We can try an open advert out We can look internally within our database and see if we've had people that we've spoken to in the past that maybe they were not a good fit for that role, but now this role that has come up kind of becomes a role that the person can fit into. Once we get significant interest from applicants, the first thing is share with them what the job description is. Why? Because it's important that people understand from the get-go the role they are coming to fill. They're able to look at themselves through a process of self-reflection or self-awareness to see if, in looking at this job description and in looking at what I currently do I actually match this vacancy that the bank is trying to fill? Our job descriptions are very explicit. It tells you what the behavioral competencies for the role are. It tells you what the functional and technical competencies for the role are. And so you're able to do some form of self-evaluation before you even apply. You're already evaluating whether you fit or otherwise. And if you go ahead to do that, then we go through a series of selection interviews. Now, those selection interviews have different purposes. Some of those interviews are trying to measure and assess the technical skills and competencies of the person. And most times, if not all the time, in those interviews, you're meeting the guys who really need the talent. You're meeting the guys who already have the technical know-how. Once you go through that, then there's another what do we call it now? Should I say behavioral assessment, right? That behavioral assessment could be a chart, right? It could be an assessment-based selection process. That assessment-based selection process could mean us just watching how you react to certain situations and circumstances, right? You don't know it's part of the process, but we know it's part of the process, right? But we've given you a heads up that you're coming in here and we're going to just be assessing you on this. And that's because one of our core values is tenacity, right? And tenacity means that you're very resilient, right? So we want to see if you're able to show that resilience in a particular situation. And then you go through those stages. Once you're done with those stages, we get to the process where you're meeting the executives. The executives typically are trying to assess whether the person that's coming to join the bank actually is someone who fits the culture, who can engage, and that's usually a very, very, very short session, and that typically wraps up the talent acquisition process in ProvidusBank.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. So, yeah, what stood out to me in terms of thinking about our theme today, which is moving a person from candidate to advocate, it struck me that there are some aspects that may well drive that, and I'm sure you'll dive in, but certainly you talked about empowerment, sharing a job description that is concrete enough that it gives me enough information to know whether I sincerely should be able to contribute here. So I come in with my eyes open, and a nice focus as you go through on behaviours, which is interesting because I've been struck as we've gone along that you mentioned the power of what I'd call the power of attitude quite a few times in terms of contributing. Thank you so much. And behaviours and culture fit. And I should say that ProvidusBank has a phenomenal rating from its employees on our survey in terms of management, hiring people who fit in well here, an incredibly high score, well into the 90s, that, kind of underlines that actually through the organisation, people believe and see that. I've sort of answered a little bit of the next question I had in mind, which was probably the happy piece, which was how do you ensure a positive candidate experience through the hiring process? Is there anything else you'd add?
So I think for us, one thing that's consistent or that typically should happen in the hiring process is constant engagement with the candidate.
Right.
Yeah, to be honest, it's something that we always try to improve on, but it's something that it's a critical element of our selection and hiring process where we're trying to carry you along, because again, we kind of work in a system, or should I say an environment that's a bit volatile. I'll give you a typical example. So for instance, we've been working through trying to fill our manning gaps for 2025, but at the same time, we're also going through a business combination where we're trying to bring on board another bank and also bring on board its employees. So typically it means that we need to pause on our hiring process because we're going through an acquisition. Now, maybe we had people in the pipeline who we had engaged, and as such, we need to go back to them and say, oh, there's been a temporary hold on your recruitment process because there's some business exigency that has come up. But what is important is to always give that feedback. What is important is to always create that engagement with the candidate. I think that that's very critical for a positive candidate experience. So when you're looking for someone who's going to transit from being a candidate to an advocate, those little things, again, like giving them an update on the status of their recruitment, telling them why the bank, for instance, may not be going ahead to engage them. Those little things are very important. In some cases, you may need to actually be point blank and tell them that, oh, we think that you'd be more suited to this particular role, but we don't have a vacancy in that particular role. This engagement with you has shown us that you're a better fit for this particular job role. And I think those kind of engagements kind of make the person transit from being a candidate to an advocate, where the person is saying, oh, I really like your bank. I really want to work with your bank because here I was thinking that I was heading in this direction, but the interview process, the chat with, an executive director has shown me that I'm better suited for this. Those things kind of show that even before the person has joined the organization, you're already interested in their career growth and development. And when someone sees that someone is interested in your growth and development, even before they join the organization, trust me, they're going to speak very glowingly about your organization. I think that's what transits some of our candidates to becoming advocates.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so the power, perhaps, as I might say, of treating them as an insider before they've even joined and giving them the care of communication. And you also mentioned the power of being honest and thinking about them as individuals and where they sit best. I was struck too earlier in the conversation by your saying, that you get to know people and then you can keep their details and then be aware of them if something else comes up, which is very powerful. How do you, sounds like there's an awful lot to be proud of. How do you measure the effectiveness of your recruitment process?
That is tricky, but it's doable. It's something that we do on a monthly basis. So we measure it along certain metrics. First off is the turnaround time. How long does it take for us to close a gap? Secondly is the fact that we deliberately and intentionally measure candidate experience, right? So for everyone who goes through the talent acquisition process, when you're done with that process, whether you're successful or not, right? We send out a survey that's trying to track how you would rate us on number one, the interview process, right? How you rate us on the duration of that interview process, the clarity of information that you received about the job role before you even started the process. And we take these things, we aggregate them, and we use it to determine on a scale whether we're doing well or where we need to improve, right? And that intentionality is something that has made us always work towards building and improving the process. Because if I see that in the month of January, for instance, a lot of our new hires and candidates, if I see that they felt like the process was too long, right? If I feel like if I see from that data that they felt like the job description was not clear enough or they didn't get a job description, then it makes us go back to the drawing table to say, okay, what's the root cause analysis of this? Why do we find ourselves in a situation where we're supposed to having a benchmark score of 90%, for instance, in our candidate experience score, and we're scoring 60%? What's the problem?
Yeah.
So it makes us go back, look at the issues that would have happened that month. And then on the basis of that, we say, okay, these are the areas of improvement for us. We don't need to repeat this. This is something that we need to nip in the bud. And it helps us build that process. So there's a lot of intentional action to make sure that we're measuring candidate experience. And maybe, just maybe, that's one of the reasons why our people feel like they're going through a process that is open and clear, as evidenced in the Great Place to Work rating.
Thank you so much. I wonder, how do you ensure, this is a tough demand, ensure, but how do you drive towards diversity in hiring?
So I think that in driving diversity, in our process, some things are not relevant to us. Some things are not relevant to us. We may collect the data, but that data does not deliberately impact or influence the decisions that we make around the hiring process. So for instance, gender, it's not really important. We may collect the data because we need that demographic data, but someone doesn't get a job because the person is male or the person is female. No. In fact, we're celebrating International Women's Day on Saturday. People in my team told me on Monday that the whole month of March is for women. So I want to give it to all the women. But guess what? The demography of ProvidusBank today shows we have more women than we have men. And they're doing a very fantastic job, regardless of whichever role they find themselves in. So gender is important, but it doesn't determine our hiring decision. Another thing that's important for us, but it doesn't determine our hiring decision, is age. We see a lot of young people in ProvidusBank that are doing very great things. The workforce in itself, right? The core of that workforce is made up of very young people. And those young people, they're not afraid to bring up their innovative ideas. Why? Because ideas rule the world. And if you want a good blend of innovation, you need to bring young people who have daring ideas. So yeah, age sometimes is a factor in other organizations, but it's not a factor in ProvidusBank. It doesn't determine our hiring decision. Ethnicity and tribe does not determine our hiring decision. Now, these little things are things that influence diversity and inclusion, right? But for ProvidusBank, it's really not important. Religious affiliation does not determine whether you get hired or you don't get hired. And I think that if you de-emphasize this, I've given you a couple of examples now. If you de-emphasize these things, it helps build the diversity base of an organization. It helps drive an inclusive culture, right? And I think that's what we try to do in ProvidusBank. The records speak for themselves. I mean, from the Great Place to Work institution in itself, we've gotten this award back to back as the best workplace that promotes diversity and inclusion in Nigeria for large corporations. So, I mean, that's something that we're very proud that we do and we will continue to do.
Thank you so much. And indeed, on the note of your phenomenal culture as shared by your employees, what role would you say your really strong employer brand plays in attracting the best people?
So I'd say that employer branding is everything. Employee branding is at the bedrock of talent attraction. And in looking at employee branding, you need to define a niche, right? You can't be everything to everyone, but you can do your best to make sure that you're giving everyone the best of what they want, right? So for us, we've defined what we want the perception to be about ProvidusBank. We've defined how we want people to think about ProvidusBank. We've defined how we want our talents, right? Prospective talents to think about the bank. And that simply is embedded in the word care, right? We want our prospective talents, as well as the talents that we have as part of the workforce, to think of this bank as a bank that's big on employee care, that's big on employee wellness and employee welfare. Now, if you take these three factors, right, they're all encompassing because, again, if you're big on welfare, your compensation and your remuneration will be very good, right? If you're big on wellness, it means that you're consistently driving your employees to take their health seriously. Their physical health, their mental health, it's important to them, right? And if you're big on employee care in itself, then you're not looking at the staff, you're not looking at the talent as an individual, you're looking at that person's ecosystem, right? So for instance, in ProvidusBank, we're probably the only bank, and if there's any other, maybe, but we're probably the only bank that's interested in not only providing you with health coverage, but if you have parents, right, we're also interested in providing some form of medical cover annually to your parents, because your state of mind will not be at rest if you have parents that are trying to get medical cover, right? And so as a bank, we took it upon ourselves to say, we're big on employee care. How can we show that to our employees? And so we have a medical care cover for parents, right? In partnership with one of our medical institutions. We're also, again, saying, what's another critical ecosystem of a talent? We identified the family, right? And I said we do have a very young workforce. And a young workforce means we have young people who are just getting married, they're just building a family, starting off a family. And under our employee care initiative, one of the things that we push deliberately is support for families who just put to bed. And so we have a very beautiful, curated, I like to call it the pregnancy box. But anyway, it's a box that typically has everything that a newborn would need, right? And that, again, speaks to the fact that in the bank, we're big on the wellness of our people, we're big on the welfare of our people, and we're big on the care that they get from the institution. I think for me, these three things form the core of our employee branding. What people will say is our employee value proposition, but I think that value proposition is broader. If you look at our employee branding perspective, that this is very important to us, and as such, we deliberately push it out to both new hires, prospective hires, and existing hires.
Thank you so much. And thank you for those powerful examples, Kingsley. And again, for me, at the beginning, I sort of observed you talked about people adding value, but I also had very much the sense that you truly value people, so that it's both sides and this whole sense of care and wellness and welfare. And it sort of echoed that for me. And I love the talk about the ecosystem and seeing, I don't know, it felt like seeing the whole person and what their responsibilities and interests would be. How do you let prospective employees get a glimpse of this? So how do you let them see your culture in the recruitment journey?
So I'll tell you one of the very easy ways that we do this. We bring them for physical interviews, right? And rather than keep them in a waiting room, right? We kind of create some space for them in the work floor, so they see how people engage and interact with each other. They're watching how people are collaborating, right? They're looking at, oh, okay, everybody here seems to be smiling. That's very strange. Why are people here smiling? And they're seeing the camaraderie everywhere, right? And that's one way we're showcasing. That's one way we're showcasing it. Because typically, I typically say to my team that the recruiters are the best people to sell the company or sell the bank, to a prospective hire. But one touch point that we always use to sell the bank is to bring them in, show them what a typical day looks like in ProvidusBank, just by sitting and watching how everyone is interacting, sitting and watching how everyone is, jocularly getting busy and doing the work, and showing them that sometimes banking is not as hard as people make it seem. You can make impact, you can be efficient, and you're smiling, and everybody's happy at work.
Thank you so much. So yeah, letting them really feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. And there's loads I'd love to ask you, but I'm going to have to restrict my list today. But here we go.
Okay.
Something I'm really interested in is what I'd call the power of fresh eyes. So when people join an organisation, how do you use the wisdom of new hires with their fresh perspectives to evolve your culture?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, because sometimes you think you're doing it the right way until you get a pair of fresh eyes who come in and say, can we suggest that you do this, in a particular way? So we say to ourselves that we foster a listening culture. We're very much against the culture of silence. And because we're against the culture of silence, we want people to speak up. When you see an idea, we want you to tell us, right? And there are ways to do that. There's a formal platform in the bank where you can put forward an idea, right? And there's a team that takes your idea, reviews your idea, and works on it. And then there are informal ways where you can engage your line manager, you can engage even HR, because we operate an open door policy. Now, that pair of fresh eyes is something that we want to see, but we also want to see that pair of fresh eyes make those suggestions after they've come in and they've watched what exactly happens in the organization. So they're not just coming and from day one, they're telling us, this is what we think. We think there's something called participant observation, right? And in participant observation, one of the tenets of that principle is that you come into a culture or a society and you watch how they do things in that society. And on the premise of what you've seen as a participant, right, you can put forward your ideas. But it is critical that as a participant, you're observing, right, what is being done. Because there's no culture that that cannot be that cannot evolve. There's no culture that can't change, right? That's why culture change is very critical. But there's also the two things that are very fundamental. There's culture bias, and then there's culture shock. So when you come into an organization with a fresh pair of eyes, you want to be sure that your idea isn't biased, right?
Right.
And you want to be sure that it's not the shock that you're experiencing that is making you put forward that idea. And when you put forward that idea in ProvidusBank, for instance, there's an engagement process that happens, right? And so we're saying, oh, we like this idea. How does it translate to efficiency? How does it translate to? And so once you articulate it for us, we're jumping on it, right? And that's how our new hires feel like they're part of the culture, because we don't silence them, we don't shut them up when they have new ideas that they want to bring on board.
I love it. Thank you. I love particularly that you're against the culture of silence and the power of encouraging people to observe and watch, and then I suppose contribute with their fresh eyes, but also with knowledge of how their fresh eyes translate through what's happening. Thank you.
Yep.
Well, I've mindful we just have a few minutes before we should see about some questions, but I really, if you don't mind, would love to ask you about one of the hot topics for so many of us at the moment, which is around AI and automation. How would you say AI or automation has impacted your recruitment? And any comment, I suppose, any sort of comments on this contemporary topic that we hear so much about?
So I think you're generally right. AI is something that's really gaining momentum. Generative AI in particular is something that is taking the world by storm. I think that we're seeing a lot more progress in the Western world, right? And this is giving context to my answer, by the way. There's a lot more progress in the Western world than we have in Africa. In Nigeria in particular, the drive in AI, we're only gradually seeing what I call scratching the surface. And what do I mean by that? We're seeing people use ChatGPT, people are talking about DeepSeek, we're seeing people use OpenAI, but they're using those things for very pedantic matters. So for instance, in recruitment, a lot of people use AI to write their CVs, right? Right? A lot of people use AI to come up with possible interview questions. Yes, that's good. But how are we translating generative AI into the recruitment process? It's not so much of how we're doing it, it's so much of what we want to do, right? I keep saying that what we're going to see in Africa is something called reverse integration, where the whole world has adopted AI and then we're trying to catch up with them. So we now need to quickly integrate so that we're not left behind. And so in our talent acquisition process, yes, we use AI through our ATS, application tracking system, to look at candidates. But again, you can't throw away the human element in AI. Right? And so AI uses data, right? AI uses algorithms. AI is built on machine learning, right? But there's the human element where, for instance, I was reading about an organization in the US where they have these video interviews and an AI algorithm selects the best candidates from everyone who submits their applications. But guess what? Maybe the algorithm is just reading facial expression. It's using those techniques that we use for lie detector tests, right? But the human element means that in having a conversation with someone, you can tell, right, if this person is really saying those things that matter, or if the person has deliberately configured themselves in that video interview to beat all the traps that have been set by the algorithm. So we are tending towards adopting AI in our talent acquisition process, but we're not throwing away the human element. That human element means that you must have some level of conversation and discussion with people, right? Because at the end of the day, you're not going to work with AI, you're going to work with people, right? Your customers are going to be people who are going to walk into our banking halls and they're going to want a service, right? And so we want to be able to have that conversation to see how you react under tough conditions, to see how you react under extraneous circumstances. That's very important for us. So we're gradually working towards integrating AI into our talent acquisition process, but we're not throwing away the human element in all of this.
Yeah, thank you so much. So yeah, use tech where it adds value, but yeah, we still matter in terms of humans. Yeah, and our contribution. Thank you. Thank you so much. Shall we take a breath now and see? And I've got plenty more questions I'd love to ask, but let's see whether anybody else has shared any questions in the chat. We haven't had any questions in the chat. If anyone listening to us would like to add some questions, I'll give you a moment to do so now. And I'll just, while I ask Kingsley another question, if I may. Kingsley, what would you say, just thinking generally, what would you say is the most challenging part of getting talent acquisition right? And how do you overcome the challenge?
I think the most challenging part of getting talent acquisition right now, is first and foremost, how do we get the right people? Considering the jackpot syndrome, there's currently a dearth of talents right now. It's amazing where a lot of people have gone to the UK, they've gone to the US. In fact, recently I was reading a report that said people are moving to Vietnam, right? And you know, a lot of countries are coming up with um, migration policies that are creating open borders for talent, right? The UK is coming up with the global talent visa that allows people who they consider as talents to move. You know, you're seeing that across board. And so the major challenge right now for recruiters is how do you get the right talent, right? Because now that skill flight that we're experiencing in the country is beginning to take a toll on even how we select the right people. It's beginning to take a toll. It's very evident now that when you bring in someone, right, you have to deliberately go through another level of technical skills reinforcement. You need to train them because sometimes the best talents have gone. So
Right.
that's for me is the challenge right now, right? And how do you keep them when you eventually get these talents? Because how do you make sure that they're not thinking about how to leave the country? That's the current dilemma that's facing every HR practitioner. Can a company literally compete with a country when it comes to offering benefits? That's tough. But I think we've tried to find a way around it. How have we tried to do that? First off, we've tried to create an enabling environment, right? That enabling environment means that, again, money is not the focus. So welfare is the focus. Wellness is the focus. Care is the focus. That kind of reduces the tendency of people wanting to take flights and jackpot, right? That's one way that as an institution, we've tried to mediate this challenge.
Thank you so much. So the power of caring for people, and what you mentioned powerfully earlier about thinking about people's whole ecosystem and wellness and welfare and care. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kingsley. And while we've been chatting, we've had a couple of observations, and obviously the topic of AI has sparked some discussion. And we have a question: what exactly is the ultimate disadvantage of AI to human learning? I wonder.
That's tricky.
Thoughts.
That's tricky. I'll share my thoughts. So now, AI in itself is not bad. It's not bad. Why? Because the three perspectives that we typically can see the impact of AI in any organization. Three perspectives. Number one, the adoption of AI, you see it in your efficiency levels, right? So yes, you might say what you want to say about AI, but truth is that once you adopt AI, you see it in your efficiency levels. To be very honest, AI studies have shown that AI reduces recruitment turnaround time by as much as 50%. So it means that you're able to fill your roles a lot quicker and faster. AI improves your experience levels, right? And that's where it becomes critical for learning, right? Why? Because most times you typically can't push everyone into the modular classroom learning engagement sessions. Sometimes you need to rely on AI. It's called artificial intelligence, right? So in itself, it's a warehouse and a plethora of knowledge that you can tap into, right? And as such, even if you don't know anything about a particular subject matter, and you have a Samsung phone or you have access to Google, the AI platform for Google is Gemini. If you go on Gemini and you type in whatever it is you're looking for, Gemini gives you a wide range of answers. So in itself, it's great because it gives you an opportunity to build your knowledge, right? AI in itself gives you an opportunity to get a lot more understanding, right? So that in itself is an advantage, right? So I don't want us to think that AI is not good. Honestly, AI has fantastic benefits, fantastic opportunities. However, I think that one thing that AI cannot replace is, again, I said it earlier on in the conversation, it can't replace human engagement and human interaction, right? So AI is machine learning. So it tells you point blank what this is. But maybe in a classroom where you're learning, right, you're able to further ask the lecturer certain things, and the depth that the lecturer is able to give you based on his or her experience, right, is quite different from the depth that you will get from the AI platform or the AI platform that you're using. So I think that's where human experience and the human element trumps AI in terms of learning.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kingsley. So a power of, as I understand it then from your perspective, yes, AI has lots of power, and one of our other contributors, Blessing, noted that perhaps we can use, AI to create CVs and so on. So there's definitely a place for it in learning, but actually, again, as in recruitment, it's we as humans add an invaluable element and richness. I think I'm so delighted to see more questions coming in today, and we, I think, have time for perhaps one more before we wrap up. And so I thought perhaps, and they're all such great questions, but I thought perhaps I would, Abina has asked us a question about work-play balance, and I thought it might be nice to focus on that, to have a different topic as well. So they say, in ProvidusBank, is there anything like work-play balance? If so, how do you showcase it?
I think that question means, do we have a work-life balance structure? I would think that that's what that question means. Where typically we're saying, how do we mediate between doing the work when you're supposed to do the work, but also create an environment for people to rest and relax? You know, it's not always about the work. Yeah. And yes, in ProvidusBank, we actually we spend a lot of time in the office, Monday to Friday, no disputes. But we typically like to say that when you need time off, and that time off could be formal through your vacation days, right? Your leave days, or informal, where you have to take time off to do personal things. The bank is always willing and ready to support you. We typically don't like to put work events on weekends, except it's absolutely necessary. If you come to ProvidusBank, any of our locations, work closes 5. If you get here by 5:30, 6, you probably meet a location that's almost empty because everyone has closed and gone home. So we don't deliberately want people to stay back, because that does not foster the work-life balance that we're trying to create, right? I think those little things that we do are things that foster work-life balance. We try and also make sure that we get people to go on their annual leave every year. You know, sometimes we meet people who really love their jobs, but no, we want you to take some time off, go and rest, right? That's part of the wellness mentality that we have for our employees. I think those little things are things that we do just to, you know, foster work-life balance.
Thank you so much, Kingsley. So the work-life balance approach reflects your overarching approach of care, by the sound of it, and helping people to feel valued and, I suppose, contribute strong value. And I note as we're coming up to the hour, I simply wanted to say thank you so much, and it's been a real privilege talking with you, and thank you all for listening. And I'd like to invite you to make any parting words, Kingsley, before we hand over to our country leader, Temere, from Great Place to Work. So thank you from me.
All right, thank you, Petrina, and thank you for having me. I think that this has been a very interesting and enlightening conversation. I think parting words would just be me saying that it's very good for HR practitioners at this time to determine what talent acquisition strategy they want to adopt, whether they want to buy them, whether they want to borrow them, whether they want to build them. So if you're buying, you're going outside to get talent. If you're building, you're looking internally, developing skill levels. And then if you're borrowing, you're determining, you know, which company has talent that you want to poach from and things like that. All in all, I think that in itself is able to make people move from being candidates to advocates. And I want to say thank you once more for having us join, or having, you know, Kingsley join this conversation.
Thank you so much. Temere?
Excellent session we have had with Kingsley. I dare say, as an organization, that we can vouch for ProvidusBank. They are one of the companies that we regard as a platinum certified company. Platinum certified company is a company where their trust index scores are into the 90s. They've proven 2 years in a row that they are a great place to work. He has said some few things that really caught my fancy. He said something about, just a minute, we very much are against the culture of silence, right? Because a number of times in organizations, you see people say, well, it's not cast in stone, so maybe we don't need to do it. But where a organization begins to push that you don't keep quiet, you always speak out and be heard, it plays a very critical role in being able to create that great work experience that we see for companies. There's something he said also to around that AI helps with the recruitment process, right? About 50% of recruitment processes have been brought down by AI. He also said that one of the best ways to sell his organization is to invite people to come in and see what the organization looks like real time, firsthand. But we see from our analysis, we've done this for quite a while. We spent Q1 last year reaching out to companies to say to them, being certified, what has it done for you? And one of the things they had said to us was that it enabled them to attract great talent. So basically not speaking too much about the fact that as an organization, being certified, a badge that is recognized in 170 plus countries globally, you can't get better than having that badge to be able to attract great talent to your organization. We also know that this is so critical and so certain because of the fact that there is an improved employer value proposition by being certified as a great place to work. Our analysis points to the fact that there is a decreased cost per hire globally that we see where companies are great workplaces, because for one, it's a badge that is recognized in those many countries. For one, it's a badge that speaks to credibility. It speaks to an acceptance of what we do and preach for companies, and we've done this for 30 plus years. And so we see companies deliberately going out to get certified because they know that it enables them to attract great talent. We also see that for companies that are good workplaces, we see employee satisfaction levels that are higher. We see well-being levels also very high for companies that are great workplaces, knowing that at the end of the day, that employees believe that they work in an organization where they feel welcome, where they feel that they can contribute their best and put their best foot forward at all times to achieve company's objectives in an environment of trust. It's been a great time with Kingsley today. We've learned a lot about what ProvidusBank does in terms of the onboarding process down to becoming or making employees become advocates of their great culture. In furtherance of what we do as an organization, we have, in partnership with Business Day in the month of April, we have a well-being conference where we're basically looking at how we are aligning employee well-being with profitability in Nigeria's workforce. You would see linked opportunity for you to be able to scan the QR code so that you are able to register and join and be part of this organization or part of this session that will have a lot of insightful speakers come share knowledge. It would have case studies around Nigeria's best practices around well-being. So it's going to be a very interesting period that we're going to be having, session that we're going to be having with people, with HR leaders, with organizations, heads of organizations on the 8th of April this year. Looking forward to seeing you during that conference. Once again, thank you, Lord Petrina, for your always very insightful sessions. Kingsley, you're doing a great job at ProvidusBank. It's a journey, right? So even when you are a platinum certified company, it's still a journey to achieving greater heights. And so we're looking forward to greater heights for your organization. Thank you very much for this session this afternoon. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.